Yes, y'all, it is I, High Tech, and welcome back to another super necessary installment of my Remember series, the off-script series where I take you down on a trip on memory lane, and we just dive into some of the banger-ass games that I grew up with as a kid or a teenager. So I know it's been a little bit overdue. I've been kind of brainstorming, trying to figure out which game I want to cover, which era, console, that sort of thing. And something kind of like came up. It just kind of clicked. And then I was like, you know what? I have a perfect game. And this is a game that I really, really love. I hold dear. I don't even know how I got this game, to be honest. Now that I think about it, I don't really know how I got a lot of my games. Damn, did I steal them? Am I a thief? Am I going to get punished? So, with that being said, I think the game that we're talking about today can only be, will only ever be THQ Volition's The Punisher.
My whole family died in a mob hit. I should have died too. But I lived.
So, as usual, I'm just going to give you guys like the brief background on the game, how it came to be, the consoles that, the platforms it was released on, and that sort of thing. And then we'll dive into the section where I give you my memories, my experience, my time with the game. This one will be relatively shorter, sweeter, just because there's not too much information on this game and its development cycle. So I just gathered whatever I could based on my knowledge and my experience with the game, and then whatever I was able to get on the interwebs, and I'll present it to you, and then we'll just jump right into it. So to start, this is a gem of a game because this is back during the era of superhero games that were before Spider-Man 2, so we didn't have the blueprint for what like a good superhero game was, essentially. And this game is probably one of the, it's not like one of the first or the early, first superhero games, because there's tons of Marvel comic, DC comic superhero games that have existed before this game. But I think this game was definitely one of those games that kind of was like really solid for what it was, and it didn't actually suck. That's the thing, you know what I mean? I think it aged pretty decently well for what the game is, and it's still fun to play to this day. Like, the footage that you see on the screen is me playing the game, and honestly, like, I had a really, it's 2025, and I had as much fun with it today as I did when I was a kid. It's just viewing it through a different lens, but still, like, really good. But this game was developed by Volition Inc., which is now known as Deep Silver, and they're pretty much known for, at the time when they developed The Punisher, they were mostly known for Red Faction at the time, and they didn't have too many games under their belt. I want to say The Punisher was probably their, like, 5th game or 7th game or something like that. Like, you know what I mean? So, 7 games in as a developer, like, that's still, like, really, really in their infancy, as game devs. And, I think the game is really good. This is the game that came out before Saints Row, by the way. These guys also did make Saints Row. So, in order, it was The Punisher and the first Saints Row, and then obviously they went on to make Saints Row 2 and so on and so forth afterwards. So just, and when you play the game, you kind of feel the similarities and, like, just their game development style and that kind of thing. So the game came out on PS2, it came out on Xbox, and it came out on the GameCube? I think it was the GameCube, and the PC. Now, this game is an interesting one because this is a Marvel game that almost got the adults only rating, which is pretty crazy if you think about it, because, like I said, this was before, like, this is pre-MCU, like, this is, 18, 15, MCU, you know, BC MCU, however you want to say it. So like Marvel really hadn't been established yet as like the family friendly kind of PG, meant for everybody, you know, franchise that it's known for now, you know, with your Hulks and your Spider-Mans and, you know, Iron Man's, where he's just like language, or that's Captain America, but you know what I mean. So it's the fact that it's a Marvel game that almost got adults only. That's pretty wild, because for games to get that rating, they have to have, I think it's either like extreme violence or extreme sexual content. And in this case, it was extreme violence because of the, you know, there's a mechanic in the game that, you know, I'll dive into it right now, but there's a mechanic in the game that, you know, almost gave it that rating. So Marvel hadn't been established yet, you know, it sometimes dove into the really graphic and gory realm of things like The Punisher, things like Blade. Obviously, we had the Blade movie at the time, and while it is a Marvel comic book character, you know, in feature film, it wasn't, you know, like an MCU or a Marvel movie at the time, kind of like Howard the Duck. It was like that. And so The Punisher is, you know, kind of fell into that gory graphic kind of area of Marvel. And so, you know, at the time it was just like, hey, let's just make a game of The Punisher that is as brutal as the comic book series. And so that's what they went for. So we had The Punisher movie, which came out in, I think that came out in 2004 or 2003. It was one of those two. I want to say 2003, because the movie came out, you know, with Thomas Jane, and you know, it was pretty good, you know, for what it was. And then normally, you know, because at that time in that area, well, shortly into the future, whenever Marvel or superhero films would come out, there's the video game tie-in, you know, that would come out like right with it. So it's like, here's the game, or sorry, here's the movie, and here's the game. You can be this character. And the game usually sucked a bunch of monkey nuts, but in this case, the movie came out, and then the game came out about 8 months later. So then the game came out on April 12th, which is my daughter's birthday. Yes, yes, for babies. Yes, for babies. In 2004. So April 12th, 2004 is when the Punisher game came out. And it didn't follow the movie exactly like most comic book video game tie-ins, you know, kind of do. So this one, it did this thing where it followed the movie a little bit, but then it followed like a comic book storyline too. So it was kind of like, you know, half and half. So the Punisher comic book storyline that it followed was the storyline called Welcome Back, Frank, and it was written by Garth Ennis. And so, you know, it took, like I said, a bit from the movie and a bit from the comic books. And so the cool part is with this game, the voice actor to play the Punisher was also Thomas Jane. So it was quite literally, it's like, all right, we are actually taking a bit from the movie, we are taking a bit from the comic, and we're gonna just smush them, and they're gonna smash and bang in the back of the Jeep in which Frank Castle's family was run over. Okay, so that's the foundation of, you know, how the game, you know, the storyline that the game was going to follow. And it's kind of like your typical, you know, Punisher, you know, storyline. It's just like, you know, he's just punishing all the crackheads in the crack den. And then he almost gets run over by a car. And then he's just like, who's driving that car? And then he like traces it to the chop shop. And then, you know, the Nucci's are in there. And then we start getting like, you know, cameos from like the comic book verse. You know, so we got like the Nucci's, and then we got Bushwhacker, and then we got the Russian, aka Kevin Nash, aka Super Shredder.
It's a Super Shredder!
And then you go later on, and then you're at the zoo, and then there's the Kingpin, and then Iron Man comes out, and it's not Tony Stank. And it's just a bunch, it's just like, you know, just like typical Marvel type shenanigans going on. And, you know, it's nothing special, nothing to write home about, but you know, it does its job and it does what it's supposed to do. So with the storyline set on, you know, how the game is going to progress, then you just play it. It's a third person, you know, kind of shooter, cover type shooter, early cover shooter. And, you know, before Gears of War. So, you know, very light elements, you know, there you can crouch behind, you know, couches and counters, and then you can shoot. There's like a fine aim mode. You can go for headshots and this and that and the other. And, you know, just kind of almost like a run and gun, but very arcade-like. You know, there's a score system, and, you know, before you start each mission, it's like, oh, if you get this many points, then you'll get the bronze medal. If you get, you know, that many points, you'll get the silver medal. And you can unlock different things with those points that you get. You know, you can get, you know, perks for Frank. You know, you get more health, you get more armor, you find more ammo. You can get certain attachments for some of your weapons. You know, just things like that, you know. But what really set this game apart, and this ties back to the rating system, was it had this really, really cool interrogation system where you can grab an enemy as a human shield first, and then you get to interrogate them and you can extract info from them. And I remember when I first played this game, number one, I didn't know what the heck I was in for when I played the game, because this was I don't even know if it was like my uncle's game or I don't know, but when I played the game, you know, and then you interrogate someone for the first time, it's just like, well, how the heck does this thing work? And pretty much what it is like, you know, you grab them and then you have the option to push a button and then you can interrogate them, and you can do things like, you know, put your gun in their face. You could choke them. You can just like punch them, you know, in the head and the mouth, and pretty much until like they get to that breaking point, and then they just start, you know, snitching. But the cool part is, like, as you do damage, there's this meter that fills up, and it fills up, and you're supposed to keep it in like a specific zone of the meter, kind of like Mortal Kombat's Test Your Might. How you got to push the buttons and keep it in a certain little area. And then once it's there, you push the button, and then, you know, that's how you break the object. Well, this is kind of like how that works too. So you gotta keep doing damage, and you keep their meter in a certain zone for like X amount of seconds. It's like 2 seconds or something like that. And then they give you information. But if you go overboard and, you know, you hit them too many times and you don't keep the meter in the specific zone, then you can kill them. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty funny, especially when you do the one where you put the gun in their face and you're threatening them, and if you just do it too much, like, you know, you push the gun too far into their face, like, he'll just shoot them, and then it's just like boom, and then they're just dead, and you're like, oh, dude, it's actually really, really hilarious. My daughter agrees as well. And it's because of this interrogation system, that's what almost gave the game the adults only rating. And now you're probably thinking, like, well, what's so bad about an interrogation system, right? That didn't sound too bad. Well, here's the cool part about it. Was there were special enemies that had you know, Punisher logos on top of them, you know, on their that were floating above them, and if you grabbed those enemies, then they had special information, so you had to be sure not to kill them, right? And here is the catch: is every time, for the most part, there's a special enemy who had special info, there was a special way to interrogate him. So there were ways, it's like, oh, you can put this guy like on a saw table and then just like drop this, you know, freaking you know, like a wood saw, like, you know, right above their nose, and just threaten them with it. And it's like, oh dang, you know, you can put their head like in a windowsill and like smash the window on their neck. There's one where you're at the zoo and you push a dude against the cage where they're keeping the rhino, and the rhino's like, and then like he just starts rhinoing towards the dude, and like you pull him away like right before it hits him. And it's like, dude, there's some really, really creative ways to, like, you know, put the pressure on these guys. And it's so hard because obviously you have to not kill them to get the info, but you also want to see how they die too. And that is where the adults only part came in, because it was those deaths when you actually go forward and, you know, kill those guys in those particular ways. That's when it got brutal. It got really gory. So they had to censor it. They had to, you know, when you, at least in the American versions, if you do decide to kill the dudes in those ways, the screen goes like super solar flare, and it gets like this black and white filter, and it just like washes out like all the blood. The camera will like pan away, or it'll like zoom in on Frank, and it doesn't show you like how they die. But some of them actually does show them getting killed, but it's like I said, it's kind of washed out, and it's all, you know, gray, black and white. You can still see them dying, and it's still pretty cool, but it's not like fully color, you know, it's not colorized or anything like that. So that's how they got away with going from the adults only rating to the mature rating, and that's how they were able to sell the game. It's just a really, really cool game, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know how I got my hands on the game, because I played this game, you know, the game came out, like I said, in 2004. I was only, you know, I was 12 when this game came out, but when I first played it, I was about, you know, 13 or yeah, you know what, I think I did play it around the time it came out. But like I said, it wasn't my game. I had never even heard of the game, but how I got it was my uncle was actually living with us at the time. And I remember when he moved in, he was just like, hey, I have a few PlayStation 2 games that like you can just have. And one of those games was The Punisher. And I was like, you know, I like Marvel Comics at the time. So I remember just thinking like, all right, cool. Like, you know, The Punisher's cool. Like Marvel comic characters, and I'll play it. And then I played the game, and I was just like, oh, dang, like this game is actually really good. I'd never played a game like this at all. You know, it was just like, it was just something that I wasn't used to, especially coming from like you know, a Marvel comic character. I'd never really experienced like the violent side, you know, the darker, gritty side of Marvel comics, other than like Blade. But at the time, I didn't even know Blade was like a comic, you know, a Marvel character. So I just thought that was like a separate thing. So this game was special to me because, you know, I first played it and I experienced it like, you know, 6th grade going into middle school. So like that kind of tween area, you know, and well, number one, I didn't like middle school because that school sucked. But number two, like my parents split up at that time, and then puberty was happening. So, you know, my nuts were itchy, and it was just like a really weird time in life, and just trying to figure things out, and nothing made sense. And so gaming was like super important to me. But it's not so much the game that made it special. It was the fact that like my uncle kind of sort of like gave it to me, but then he would also be like, hey, you know, play that Punisher game. Let me see what it's like. Because I don't know if he played it or not. I don't even know where he got it from. He might have stolen it. Shit. But he would be like, hey, like, let me see you play that Punisher game. And my uncle was not a gamer at all. Well, I had two uncles that I'd spent a lot of time with, but this particular uncle, was not a gamer. So the fact that he's like, you know, he wanted to hang out with me and like watch me play this game was really cool, because I really love playing games in front of people. I think that's like a really cool experience. I think games are like a social experience anyways, you know what I mean? You're supposed to play with either with people or with people watching you, and I really enjoyed when people would watch me play games when I was like that age. And so he'd watch me play, and he would ask me to play it a lot, and it just like, just knowing the person he was and the fact that he was asking me to play, like, it was really cool. Like, it was really cool, and it meant a lot. And so, you know, he and I would just like play this Punisher game, and, you know, we would just like come up with jokes and just have fun, and you know, we would talk about the movie, we'd watch the movie, and it was just sick, man. It was just a super sick game with lots of cool replayability, and you know, it just I think everybody should play this game. And the worst and tragic part about this game is that there is currently no modern way to play this game. You have to have pretty much a physical copy of this game to play it, because it's not available on any digital store. There is no digital version, there's no remaster, there's no nothing. The game is technically abandonware right now. So if you don't know what abandonware is, it's pretty much like where a game is so old and nothing has happened with like the licensing or the rights to it, that it pretty much just becomes like public domain, and it's just available pretty much out there, just in a recycle bin or a bargain bin, if you want to call it that. And it's up for grabs in some kind of capacity if you know where to look for abandonware. And that really sucks, because like I said, I think the game is really good. I think this game is slept on. There's not a lot of people that know about this game. I feel like the Punisher is kind of low-key. He's kind of slept on, even though he, they have like the Netflix series with John Bernthal, and then they made like 4 or 5 different Punisher movies, and he's in the Marvel Rivals now. But even with all that, I still feel like he's slept on. Like, the Punisher is kind of a sleeper character, and a lot of people don't know that he had a sick ass solo game that came out in the early 2000s. So yeah, that's pretty much my experience with this game. You know what I mean? I had it on PS2, so for me it was that PS2 era. And I didn't have a 360 yet, so I didn't even, I had no idea what was coming in the future. But for me, this is like one of those defining like games in that era where I was like, man, people need to know about this game. And that's why I'm making this video, so I can share with you that this game is a banger. It's a gem, and it deserves to be played, and it deserves to be remembered. So there you have it. That is THQ Volition's The Punisher game on PlayStation 2. And I love this game. I will forever love this game. And I want to do a full playthrough of this game. So I plan on recording the whole thing. Will I upload it? I am not sure. It depends on if you guys, want to see how the game is, or want to see what the game's like, So leave me a comment, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, I can just, put up my entire, Omega Let's Play, even though Let's Plays are, kind of dead at this point. But, whatever, we'll do it just for, for respect of the Punisher. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you've played this game, or if you have this game still, let me know. Let me know how you feel about it. Like, was it one of those, was it a banger? Like, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you remember this game? Are you interested in this game now? Because, I would be interested if I were you. Trust me. If you're not, you're going to get punished, dude. Even if you do crack or no crack, you're going to get punished, brother. I really appreciate you guys watching my vids. I like to make videos, where I share my experiences. I like to make videos where I share my thoughts. You know what I mean? I made a couple of Dragon Ball videos because I'm a big Dragon Ball nerd. I'm a Marvel nerd, fighting game guy. That's my jam. So I like making videos about that. And I feel like every time I make one of those videos, I feel like it gets really good reception. And I'm really grateful for every single view. I'm grateful for every single like, even if it's like 7 likes, I'm just super, super grateful that there's people out there liking the stuff that I am passionate about. So thank you guys, everybody, for every single click, every single view. You guys make this very rewarding for me. So thank you. That's all I got for today, guys. Until the next one, I think I got some ideas. You know what I mean? We'll see when that time comes. But other than that, have a good day, you motherfucker.